This is my evaluation of Research Project 3. The aim of this investigation was to investigate the two performances by Tottenham Hotspur Football Club. The objectives is shown on this slide and shows that I have completed it. My evidence on this first objective is shown on this slide and shows that I've completed it, and then linked to this is on my research project booklet, which is located within the section of my literature review. I managed to complete this task as I researched the definitions and from that understood what each definition communicated. Therefore, when I started my investigation and analysing on dartfish, I could tell when that act was undergoing. This led to success within my project for more accurate results from my further developed knowledge. Here is on my second slide showing evidence of my objectives is my notational analysis system. It shows that I was clearly able to design and produce a working notational analysis system, which you can also find in my research project booklet. This part of my investigation I was able to complete with using dartfish and also Excel to collect my data. Excel also allowed me to collect my results into graphs, which I could then later use in my project booklet for evidence to present my results and findings. As on the slide, you can identify that I went for a computer notational analysis instead of a hand notation, as it was much easier method to use, and I was then able to present a much more accurate result. If I describe this dartfish recording panel, you can see at the top is my performance criteria, which are selected most frequently, and then the bottom below were there to make the data more specific and accurate. The blue buttons underneath explain the type of shot which I would select after the shot has been made, and I have selected the shot button first. Then below that was the buttons to describe the area of the pitch at which the shot may have been taken from, for instance 6-yard or attacking right. Then I had below unsuccessful or successful button, which I would select if the shot was appropriate to the successful or unsuccessful button. Then below this I had the buttons of all the players involved in the two games. Lastly, I had the two final buttons which communicated which half the act was happening in. This slide shows that there is evidence between the two performances. These two graphs show the type of shot versus success, where also there are more graphs in my research booklet. Within my results section, this was able to be completed as I was able to transfer over my results from my dartfish to Excel, which I could further compare results through the use of my graphs. The graphs here showing are types of shot and success. The type of shot to success shows in different colours whether it was successful, it was blue, and unsuccessful, it was orange. From this you can clearly see there were much more successful shots, and being specific, the power shot was most successful. Also showing that on the left hand side of the first game there is much more unsuccessful shots compared to the second game, where there is much more success and also a wider range of shots taken. My last slide is my examples of evidence. And my evidence of my objectives show I was able to complete both. The 2 bits of evidence which supports this is located in my research project booklet 2. I managed to analyse the results which I found and discuss my opinions whilst giving additional improvements which would have given for the future if I was to perform this research again. You can see from my analysis that power shots are the most successful type of shot to use in a game. This can be looked at further on page 26 of my research project booklet. Now looking at my strengths. The strengths of my project was my planning, the design of my method and choice of criteria. Planning was a strength of mine as I managed to download my videos quickly and in time. Then I allowed myself to complete my tagging panel, which was going to be used to collect the data of the 2 performances, and also with this I had time to test it to make sure everything worked, so that when I come to the investigation I would have no issues. And lastly, part of my planning was that I had completed all the research proposal within Research Project 1. This allowed me to be prepared for investigating and was then a strength for myself, as I could conduct what I needed to do within my research and have successful and accurate results. My next strength was the design of method, as from analysing the 2 games it led to me having a good level of comparison and anomalies which stood in the way. This let me justify my results better. This became a strength through a further level of explanation, which I could then pass on to coaches of Tottenham if they ever wanted it. The last strength for me was the choice of criteria. The choice of sport I chose was football. This was a strength as I had a great level of knowledge within football as I have coached and played. This then therefore led to a better understanding and results more reliable if any circumstances were to have come out of the performance, which I would have known how to address. Now moving on to weaknesses. I had time management, data collection method, and my performance of criteria, which was shooting. Time management was a key one for me, as the short period of time I had to research and analyse my 2 games in I ran out and did not meet the expectations after the deadline, and met the expectations after the deadline. This was a factor I was worried about, being the deadline, and started to rush the project. This led to me missing out on criteria, then which I have led to unreliable data. This was therefore a weakness for myself and something I needed to improve. If I was to have taken my time, I could have completed all criteria with details. This then would have led to better time management and more successful in the future. Next was my data collection method. This was because as players were changing direction and speed, it was hard to identify which player was which. This meant I had to keep going back to identify the player. This meant I wasted time, but not only that, I found it hard to collect the correct data every time. This led to a weakness because it can negatively impact my results, making them unreliable. In the future, I would code my players further by setting keys such as red boots or gloves. This was This would then allow me to quickly identify the player while saving time, but also balancing this, making more successful data. Also that I cannot record data at home and had to use the Dartfish software, as college made this a weakness, and that I couldn't finish this analysis quicker. The last weakness being my performance criteria of shooting. It was unfair to analyse Tottenham on the performance criteria because it doesn't give a wide range of factors that can be built up to show the strength of the whole team, or weakness. Investigating one attribute means that there is only one thing to compare Tottenham against and reflect the performance on. However, if there was to be more criteria, one would be able to identify that maybe their shots were unsuccessful, but they could have been creating lots of chances or had loss of possession, which would then suggest that the performance was overall quite good. This then therefore was a weakness for me, as I believed it was unfair to suggest the team's results. Now moving on to my last slide of future development, we look at this investigation could be developed further by different tournaments, as then we can see if there's a difference in players' performance, as if we compare a friendly match to a big tournament game. The bigger the game, the more desired players are going to have to win. Therefore, if we were to look at an investigation between a cup game and a league game, we should see that the players' work rate and overall performance would be greater. My next future recommendation would be an analysis of Tottenham games. There are around a couple years apart from one another. This is because you could identify how the players have progressed and the team as a whole. This would be beneficial when comparing. There should be a wide range of data and differences in performance. I feel this should be a future recommendation, as it shows progression in a team and not how between a couple weeks. Therefore, you could analyse key individuals who perhaps was fresh and not at the top of their game yet, to how after a couple years they have adapted into the team. Lastly, my future recommendation of more performance criteria, as spoken about in my weaknesses. This is something I would have to bring in for a future recommendation, as investigating one attribute means that there is only one thing to compare Tottenham against and reflect the performance on. However, there was to be more criteria. One would be able to identify that maybe their shots were unsuccessful, but they could have been creating lots of chances or had lots of possession, which would then suggest that their performance was overall quite good. This being said, again, there's little to go by, but if there isn't enough criteria, having more will allow one to identify the performance on a whole and be able to communicate more positive and negatives of a performance, therefore giving a wider range of knowledge.